Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're focusing on the fourth frontier X2 heart rate monitor. We're using a really detailed review from the 5K runner as our guide.
Right, and this isn't just, a typical gadget review. We want to explore what this kind of advanced wearable tech means for heart health, especially for active people.
Exactly. Can something like the X2 actually give us useful insights that go beyond, say,
Yeah.
just step counts or basic heart rate zones?
That's the core question. The reviewer, the 5K runner, actually gave it a pretty high score, 87%, so generally positive.
Oh, good score.
Yeah, and they even mention a discount, 25% off using the code HE5KRunner. Useful if you're interested.
Good tip.
But really, our mission here is to understand what this device can tell us about our hearts during exercise and maybe even, throughout the rest of the day.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. For anyone listening who hasn't heard of it, what is the fourth frontier X2? What makes it stand out?
So fundamentally, it's a second-gen ECG sports strap, launched in 2023.
ECG, so electrocardiogram.
Exactly, that's the key differentiator. It does the sports tracking accurate heart rate, like you'd expect, but it also provides ECG-grade monitoring of your heart's electrical activity. It's trying to be both a high-performance sports tool and a serious heart monitor.
Interesting combo. What does it look like? Is it comfortable? Easy to use?
Well, it uses two chest straps, which helps get that really good skin contact needed for accurate readings, both HR and ECG.
Okay, like some traditional heart rate monitors.
Right. And these straps connect to a small clip-on pod. That's the brain, basically. It has a button, a little color display, and a side charting port. Pretty straightforward.
And the battery. How long does it last if it's doing ECG?
That's actually quite impressive. The review mentioned over 24 hours of continuous ECG recording on one charge.
24 hours, wow.
Yeah, so you can get a full day and night picture if needed. And it recharges in about 45 minutes, which is pretty quick.
So that continuous data, that's not just during the workout then?
No, exactly. It's designed so you can monitor continuously, and all this data feeds into an app and an online dashboard.
Right, the software side.
Yeah, and the reviewer highlighted that you get detailed ECG waveforms there. Plus, you can generate PDF reports, proper reports to share with your doctor. That's a big part of its value proposition, that near medical grade output.
Okay, sounds quite sophisticated. So the 5K runner liked it overall. What were the main pros they called out? What really impressed them?
Top of the list, I think, were the real-time alerts. The strap can actually vibrate, give you haptic feedback.
Vibrate, why?
If it detects certain flagged heart events during your workout, it's a direct safety feature, for immediate awareness.
Whoa, okay. That sounds potentially really important, especially if you're pushing hard.
Absolutely. Then there's the full ECG tracking itself. Being able to record for 24+ hours and easily share that detailed data, maybe even live or as those PDFs we mentioned, that's a big plus for proactive monitoring.
Makes sense. What about the sports side? Is it accurate for training?
Yes, the reviewer found the heart rate accuracy was right up there with the best, like the Polar H10. So you're not sacrificing your training data quality for the health monitoring features.
So it really does manage both things well then.
It seems so. And they also highlighted some unique data points. It offers things like heart strain and a breath-based training load, stuff you don't typically find elsewhere.
Intriguing. We should definitely
Yeah.
circle back to those.
We will. Compatibility was another positive. It syncs with Apple Health, Garmin Connect, Peloton, the usual suspects.
Integration.
And the app, while maybe a bit busy, which we'll get to, was seen as very rich in data, lots of stats, trends, and those doctor-ready reports. So summing up the pros, the potential to catch things a wrist device might miss, that near medical grade aspect, was seen as a major advantage.
Okay, those are compelling positives. But no device is perfect. What were the cons? What did the reviewer flag as things to consider?
Well, the elephant in the room is probably the price. It's around $321 or $428.
Oof, yeah, that's quite a bit more than a standard HR strap.
Definitely. It's positioned as a premium device, no doubt. Another point, maybe minor for some, is the manual start. You have to physically press the button on the pod before each workout.
You have to remember to do it.
Exactly. Easy to forget if you're rushing. The reviewer also mentioned the app layout. While powerful, they felt it could be streamlined a bit, maybe a bit cluttered initially.
Okay, a learning curve perhaps.
Possibly. Aesthetically, they called the design retro. Maybe not the sleekest look, but then again, it's usually under your shirt, so perhaps not a huge deal.
True. function over form sometimes.
Right. And fit could be an issue for some people. Getting that perfect, consistent contact for both HR and ECG might take some fiddling depending on your body shape.
That's common with chest straps, though, isn't it?
It can be, yeah. And finally, a word of caution on swimming. It has an IP67 rating, which is water resistant, but the reviewer suggested it might not be ideal for serious, prolonged swimming. Maybe okay for a splash, but perhaps not laps.
Good to know. So, practical points and that significant cost. All right, let's get back to those unique insights you mentioned. What are these data points that really set the X2 apart?
Okay, one of the really interesting ones is how it calculates training load. Most devices just use heart rate, right?
Yeah, maybe time in zones, things like that.
Well, the X2 also incorporates your breath rate into that calculation. The reviewer noted this is pretty novel, but it's backed by research. The idea is it gives a more complete picture of your actual exertion level.
Breath rate. Huh. How does that help?
Well, think about it. Sometimes an activity might feel really hard, your breathing is heavy, but maybe your heart rate hasn't fully caught up yet, or vice versa. Looking at both gives a more nuanced view of the physiological stress. It provides a different angle on exertion.
That actually makes a lot of sense, especially for maybe strength training or intervals.
Could be, yeah. Then there's body shock. This metric tracks mechanical stress, kind of like how a stride pod measures impact for runners.
So looking at impact forces.
Exactly. It's about understanding the mechanical load on your body, which could potentially help identify injury risks down the line if you're consistently overdoing the impact.
Another layer of data. Okay, and the third one, heart strain. That sounds serious.
It's definitely leaning into the medical side. It measures specific changes in your ECG waveform, specifically the ST segment.
That's getting technical now. What's the ST segment? Tell us.
Basically, it relates to how the heart muscle is repolarizing or sort of resetting after each beat. Significant sustained shifts in that segment, especially elevation, can be an indicator that the heart muscle isn't getting enough oxygen. Ischemia, essentially.
Whoa. And the X2 tracks this during exercise.
Yes, and you can set alerts. The reviewer mentioned setting one for a 0.3 millivolt shift. The idea is if you get that alert during exercise, it's a strong signal to ease off, to reduce the intensity because it's a potential sign of strain.
It's quite different from just tracking pace or power.
Yeah.
That's a real-time physiological warning signal.
Precisely. It's moving beyond performance into monitoring the heart's actual functional response under stress.
Okay, this is fascinating tech. But how accurate is it? Especially these more advanced metrics. Did the reviewer test the reliability?
They did. For standard sports HR, so just your heart rate during exercise, they compared it directly with the Polar H10 and a Garmin HRM PRO Plus.
Both known for accuracy.
Exactly. And the X2 held its own. The readings were consistently aligned. They noted a few minor glitches, but suspected that might have been due to the interference of testing multiple straps simultaneously. So for basic HR, seems very reliable.
Okay, good. What about HRV? Heart rate variability. Lots of people track that for recovery.
That was a bit more nuanced. When compared against the Polar H10 using the HRV4 training app, the results weren't perfectly correlated.
Why might that be?
The reviewer suggested it could be down to differences in exactly when the readings are taken, or maybe setup sensitivities. It wasn't bad, just not a perfect match. They felt it was still functional for tracking your trends over time, which is how most people use HRV anyway.
Right, looking for changes rather than absolute numbers. Makes sense. And the big one, the ECG itself, how did they assess its accuracy? Detecting arrhythmias and things like that.
Yeah, that's obviously hard for a reviewer to personally verify without having a known condition to test against.
Sure.
So they couldn't definitively say, yes, it caught my specific arrhythmia. But they did state that the ECG data it produced looked legitimate. The waveform seemed clean and detailed enough to be genuinely useful if shared with the doctor for interpretation.
Okay, so it looks like real ECG data.
Yes. And here's a really crucial update that happened after that review. In April 2025, the FDA actually granted approval for the fourth Frontier X Plus, which uses the same core technology as a prescription medical device.
Wait, FDA approved as a prescription device?
Yes. That's a huge validation. It means regulatory bodies have assessed the technology and deemed it accurate and reliable enough for medical use under a doctor's guidance. That really bolsters the claims about its accuracy.
Wow, okay. That FDA approval definitely adds significant weight. So this brings us back to that connection between this kind of tech and the science of exercise and heart health.
Exactly. And it's particularly relevant when we look at the research around intense endurance exercise and conditions like atrial fibrillation or
Hey,
AS.
Fib, right. I've heard there can be links.
There can be. It's complex, though. Research, like a review titled Atrial Fibrillation, AF, in endurance athletes, a complicated affair, often describes a sort of U-shaped curve.
U-shaped, meaning,
Meaning moderate exercise seems to reduce your risk of AF, which is great news for most active people.
Mhm.
But very intense, prolonged endurance exercise, especially over many years, particularly in men, has been associated with a potentially increased risk of developing AF.
so too much of a good thing, potentially, for this specific issue.
That's what some evidence suggests. The research explores possible reasons, things like the heart's left atrium stretching or changing structurally, shifts in the nervous system's control over the heart, maybe even some inflammation or scarring in the heart tissue in some athletes.
That sounds a little concerning if you're a serious endurance athlete.
It's something to be aware of, for sure, but it's crucial to add context. The same studies often show that even if endurance athletes have a higher incidence of AF, their overall cardiovascular risk profile is usually much better than sedentary people.
Okay. So lower risk of stroke or other heart problems overall.
Generally, yes, possibly because exercise helps control other risk factors like blood pressure, cholesterol, weight, and so on. It's a nuanced picture.
Right, not black and white.
Not at all.
Huh.
And this is where a device like the Fourth Frontier X2 could theoretically be very valuable. With its real-time alerts and continuous ECG capability, it might offer a way to get earlier warnings or detection of events like AF in this specific population.
So providing data that might otherwise be missed.
Potentially. Having that detailed, continuous insight into how an athlete's heart is responding to intense training could be really informative for both the athlete and their doctor, especially since, as the research points out, the standard risk scores doctors use for stroke risk haven't really been validated specifically in athletes, so more data could be helpful.
That really highlights the potential bridge between performance tech and preventative health monitoring. So pulling all this together, the review, the tech, the science, who do you think this device is really for? Who benefits most?
Based on everything, I think a few groups come to mind. Definitely active individuals, maybe over 40, who are just generally more conscious about heart health and want that extra layer of monitoring for peace of mind.
Yeah, I can see that.
Then you've got the biohackers, people who love deep data, who want ECG level insights into their workouts and daily physiology.
Data enthusiasts.
Exactly. Also, potentially people caring for relatives with known heart conditions. The monitoring and easy report sharing could be really practical there.
Good point. Having that data for doctor visits.
Right. And more broadly, really anyone who is just actively heart conscious. Maybe they're managing a condition. Maybe they just want the most detailed picture possible to discuss with their doctor and make informed decisions. The X2 offers data beyond typical trackers.
So it's not just for the super elite athlete trying to optimize performance, but has wider applications for health-focused individuals too.
I think so, yes.
Love
It
it.
really seems to sit in that interesting space between high-end fitness tech and near medical monitoring.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive on the Fourth Frontier X2, what's the main takeaway message?
Well, I think the Fourth Frontier X2 really stands out as a unique piece of kit. It seems to successfully blend that high-accuracy sports tracking we need for training with genuinely insightful, near medical-grade ECG monitoring.
A dual capability.
Exactly. Now, you have to weigh that against the significant price and maybe a couple of small usability quirks like the manual start or the app layout.
The trade-offs.
Right. But the potential upside, getting that deeper, continuous view of your heart's health, especially if you're active, seems pretty substantial. It offers insights that most other wearables just don't.
So for listeners who are really intrigued by understanding their heart's response in much more detail during exercise and just daily life, and who value that kind of validated, detailed data, the X2 could be a really valuable tool.
I think it could be, yes. Especially knowing that its core ECG technology now has that FDA approval backing its accuracy for medical use. That adds a lot of credibility.
Definitely. It
And
really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. And it leaves us with a final thought, perhaps. As this wearable tech keeps getting smarter, keeps giving us more and more detailed physiological data, how is that going to change things? How will this constant stream of personal health information reshape how we understand the long-term impacts of exercise, of lifestyle on our hearts and bodies? And maybe more importantly, how will it empower us as individuals to take more proactive, informed steps towards preventative health?
The fascinating question It feels like we're just at the beginning of seeing how this technology could really transform personal health management.
Absolutely. It's a space that's evolving incredibly quickly. Definitely one to watch.